It begins not with a scream or a bell toll, nor with the sight of blackened sores or shrouded corpses, but with the sound of hooves on dry earth, and a knock gentle yet deliberate at your door. The rider waits without speaking, the horse pawing at the dirt, as though impatient to leave. He hands you a scroll sealed in red wax, bearing no crest, no name, and no address. And then just as swiftly as he arrived, he turns his steed and vanishes into the evening light. You are left alone with the unopened letter, its paper aged and warm, as if it had waited a long time to be held by your hands. You sit for a moment staring. There have been rumors in recent weeks of illness spreading inland from the coast of villages left silent of bodies stacked like firewood outside abbeys. But they are only rumors, and rumors are like smoke, unsettling yet insubstantial. And yet, this letter feels heavier than it should. As if in opening it you are not merely breaking wax, but something older and colder than custom. The letter does not tremble in your hand. But you do. When you break the seal and unfold the parchment, a scent rises sharp like dried lavender mixed with iron. The script is formal though unsigned. It offers you coin. Good coin paid in advance with more to follow. It promises housing in a walled city some day's ride east. And it offers authority the kind that grants entrance to any home speaks louder than priests and walks unchallenged even among the dead. But there is a condition stated twice: you must wear the mask, and you must not ask why. By morning you have made your choice. You do not pack much. The tools of your trade are simple, cruel, and few: a long overcoat of waxed leather, stiff and smelling of tar. Gloves so thick they muffle even your own pulse when you press your wrist. And wrapped carefully in cloth, the thing you've never worn, but always known you'd have to the mask. Beaked black and strange. It rests in your satchel like a sleeping bird. You avoid looking at it. The journey is long. The road twists through wet forests and misty valleys where no birds sing, and the taverns are silent but for the clink of cautious cups. At each village you pass, doors are barred from within, and children are kept indoors. Once you see a cart piled with straw and cloth bundles moving slowly toward a distant abbey. The driver doesn't meet your eye. On the fourth day you crest a hill and see it the city that summoned you. It does not look sick. From this distance its stone walls gleam in the sun, and its towers rise like fingers toward the clouds. You can almost forget why you are here. But then the wind shifts and the smell finds you. Not the scent of rot, not yet, but the sour sting of smoke vinegar and something else, something human. The gatehouse is open but silent. A single guard stands there, masked, not armored, and nods once at your approach. He says only 2 words. They're waiting. You follow him in. The streets are quiet. Too quiet. Market stalls stand abandoned. Windows are shuttered. Only a few figures move through the alleys, hurried, gloved, and looking anywhere but at you. You walk alone beneath arches and bridges, your satchel bumping softly at your seat, the mask inside feeling heavier with each step. You are taken not to the town hall or a physician's chamber, but to a small stone house beside a chapel. The door is already ajar. Inside, the air is sharp with the scent of vinegar-soaked cloth. A fire burns low. There is food and clean linen and a basin already filled. On the table sits another letter. Shorter this time, more direct. Begin at dawn. The ledger is inside the drawer. Write everything. Wear the mask. You do not sleep that night. You sit beside the fire, your eyes fixed on the satchel, listening to the soft hush of wind against stone, the crack of cooling wood, the quiet, distant sound of coughing somewhere deep in the city. And just before dawn, when the stars are still out and the candle has burned low, you unwrap the mask for the first time. Its beak gleams faintly in the firelight. The glass eyes catch your reflection, and give nothing back. You raise it slowly and put it on. You do not feel like yourself, and the city is waiting. It clings to your face more tightly than you expected, though the straps are not cruel. Inside, the world grows dim, filtered now through two small circles of smoky glass that curve your vision at the edges and tint everything a shade too dark. Your breath echoes within the beak, warm and damp, rising back at you through layers of dried herbs, packed into its hollow snout, lavender rose petals, clove sage, and a sharp trace of camphor that prickles the inside of your nose until your eyes sting. The scent is sweet, yes, but heavy, almost theatrical, like something meant to conceal a far worse smell beneath. You know the truth of it, of course. It is meant to conceal something, and in time it won't be enough. Your first steps outside feel like someone else is taking them. The thick waxed leather robe you've been given rustles stiffly at the joints as you walk creaking like an old door with each motion. The gloves make your hands feel distant, as though your fingers were borrowed from another man's body. But it is the mask that seals the transformation. It presses the world away. It silences your voice. It makes you a figure, not a man. Children, if they are outside at all, retreat into doorways at the sight of you. A baker's boy who lingers too long near a cart drops his bread and flees without a word. A woman closes her shutters. A man crosses himself and turns his back. You do not blame them. You have looked in a mirror briefly before you left, and even you recoiled. The beaked visage makes you something more than human and less. A visitor from another world or another judgment. The mask, like the city, is not here to save anyone. It is here to witness. You do not yet know what rights entails. Your destination is a tenement near the southern wall. At least that's what the ledger says. You hold it now in your gloved hand, a slim book bound in soot-dark leather. Page 1 is blank, but the top line bears a name and a number. A. Malvin, room 3C, first light. Beneath it, space to record symptoms, conditions, and whether a report was made. You are to record everything, and if needed, perform the necessary rites. You read it once, then again. The fire beside you pops, and in that moment of quiet crackling, you feel something else, something like a second heartbeat behind the words. Not in the message itself, but in the space it leaves unsaid. The letter does not tell you who wrote it, nor who awaits you. It does not name the illness, nor speak of cures. It is not an invitation. It is a summons. You knock once at the door of the building. It swings open on a warped hinge. No one greets you. No one must. You are expected and you are allowed to enter anywhere. The stairwell is narrow and smells of damp wood mildew and that same sharpness you now associate with vinegar-soaked cloth. Someone has tried to cleanse this place but failed. You step carefully over a bucket and climb slowly to the third floor. You do not speak. You do not remove the mask. It is your name now. It is your uniform, your protection, and your prison. Room 3C is at the end of a crooked corridor. The door is ajar, a small scrap of cloth tied to its handle, an old signal unspoken, but understood plague within. You do not hesitate. You enter. Inside, the light is gray and stale. A figure lies on a mattress made of straw and sacks. A man, perhaps 50, fevered and muttering, his limbs twitching slightly beneath a soiled blanket. Beside him, a bowl of water has long since gone cloudy. On the wall, a crucifix hangs sideways. You crouch your mask, leaning forward like a curious bird. The man doesn't notice you. His eyes are rolled back, his lips cracked, his neck swollen and dark. The signs are unmistakable. You reach for your stick, a long rod of polished wood, and gently lift the edge of his blanket to inspect the swellings along his thigh. They pulse faintly. You prod one. He moans, but does not wake. This is what you have been sent to do. Observe. Record. Note the progression. Your breath echoes again in your ears as you open the ledger and begin to write. Black buboes present in groin and neck. Fever high. Unresponsive. Breathing shallow. Blood crust at mouth. Unlikely to recover. Quarantine ordered. Marked for collection. You close the book, that's all. You do not administer medicine. You have none. You do not pray. Not allowed. You leave a small wax token on the table marked with the symbol of Saint Sebastian, protector against plague, and you step back into the hallway. One visit. One entry. The first of hundreds. It is enough to change you. As you descend the stairs, you see someone watching from the shadows below. A girl no more than 10, dressed in ragged linen. She says nothing, but she doesn't run. Her eyes follow you with something close to recognition. Not fear, not curiosity, but the quiet understanding of someone who knows you are part of a story that has played out before. You nod just slightly and walk past her. Outside, the wind rises. The sun is still low. The city is waking. And the mask, though it should be just leather and glass and herbs, feels warmer against your face as though it too has begun to breathe. You do not remove it. Not today. Not ever, perhaps. The ledger is still light in your hand, but it will not be for long. The morning mist clings to the cobbled streets like a veil drawn over a sleeping face. But you can tell already that the city is not asleep. It is simply pretending, holding its breath, trying not to wake the thing it fears. And you, wrapped in your robes and breathing herbs, through the long black beak of your mask, move through it, as both trespasser and guardian, invited in. Only because you are necessary, tolerated, only because your presence means they still have a chance. Not a cure, not salvation, just a chance to be noticed before they vanish. It becomes clear to you before the sun has even finished rising that this is no ordinary outbreak. You have seen pestilence before on battlefields, in orphanages, among starving villages, but this is something else. It is not just the number of sick, it is the quiet. There are no bells tolling for the dead, no funeral chants, no shouting in the streets, just door after door that closes when it hears your steps and shutters that flick shut at the glimpse of your silhouette. You walk through the central square. A market once. The stalls are empty now, some overturned, some left as though the merchants simply stepped away. Rotted fruit lies in piles. A doll face down in the dust. A single shoe near the edge of the fountain. And scrawled across the stone with what looks like ash and soot, someone has written 3 words in Latin, noli intrare mortem. Do not enter death. Not enter. The mayor finds you just past midday, not in his hall, but in the chapel. He is not a large man, but he wears layers of velvet and wool, and he speaks through a veil of perfumed cloth tied around his face. He does not sit, nor does he shake your hand. His greeting is short. You're here earlier than expected. You nod. Words are not required. You follow his gaze. Smoke curls slowly from one of the chimneys. There are no people in sight. You'll begin there, he says, voice low. You'll record what you see. That's all. We have a problem. He continues walking to a tall window and pulling aside a curtain to reveal a distant quarter of the city. They call it Black Hill. It wasn't always a hill, but the name stuck. Too many bodies. No one goes there anymore, not even the grave diggers. He hands you a second ledger, thicker. The pages are pre-numbered, a sign that someone has already decided how many deaths are acceptable or expected. You say nothing. You know what he is asking. He is not asking for treatment. He is asking for confirmation. He wants someone else, someone trained, someone disposable to see the horror and write it down so he does not have to. You'll be paid and protected. Just don't talk to anyone about what's behind the convent. He pauses, looking at you. Especially not the nuns. You nod again. You already know you will not follow that advice. By the time you reach Black Hill, the sun has turned pale behind thick clouds, and the wind has picked up. The streets are narrower here, older the buildings leaning forward like eavesdropping elders. You keep your steps even and your breath slow. The mask helps separate scent from memory, distance from fear. You are no longer fully yourself when you wear it. That is a mercy. The first house has no door, just a curtain of damp fabric pinned in place. You push it aside and step into a room that is too quiet, too clean. No bodies, no furniture. Just a single chair in the center and a pile of soot in the corner that might once have been something else. You do not linger. The second house is locked from the inside. You hear breathing through the cracks in the wood. Fast, shallow breathing. You knock once. No response. You knock again. Then slowly, you write a mark in chalk on the door, W. Observe only. The living are not always grateful to see the dead arrive early. And then you hear it. The third house is different. There are signs of struggle, scratches on the doorframe, broken glass, a trail of something dark on the stone floor. Inside, you find a family of 5, or what remains of them. You kneel. You write. You do not look at their faces too long. You freeze. The mask muffles your breath, but your heart still drums against your ribs like a warning bell. You step back. You do not investigate, not yet, not alone. Instead, you mark the door with 3 lines. It is a code known only to those who've trained where you have. It means return later, bring help, expect rot. A sound like coughing, but wrong. Wet, but too deep. Not coming from the lungs, but from somewhere further inside. Below. Beneath the floorboards. The rest of the street is much the same. Some dead. Some dying. A few pretending not to be either. You see one woman painting her shutters from inside, humming softly. When she notices you, she smiles a tired, defiant smile and keeps humming. You don't disturb her, not yet. As you leave Black Hill, a boy passes you on the road, barefoot and filthy, a rat, dangling from a string in his hand. He does not speak, but he holds out the rat as if offering a gift. For the doctor, he says. As the sun begins to set and the shadows grow long across the flagstones, you realize that you have filled 3 pages of the new ledger. That's more than you expected. More than they probably told the mayor. But you do not stop. This is your duty, your mask, your silence. You take it. You begin to understand now that you are not truly here to heal. No one ever quite said that, did they? You are here to witness, to move through a dying city like a walking quill, your every breath steeped in herbs and secrecy, your every glance transcribed into a ledger that may or may not ever be read. You are a presence, a symbol, a statement from those in power that something is being done, even if that something is only the counting of corpses and the nodding at symptoms already beyond hope. The ledger grows heavier with each passing hour, not from weight, but from consequence. Each name, each record, each note that ends with a phrase like unlikely to survive or marked for removal is a small tether pulled taut across your soul. They did not ask you to cure. They asked you to document, to observe with cold precision. You may apply balm to a wound, you may place a token beside a dying child, but only as gesture. The mask ensures this. It does not lend you the look of compassion, it steals it. And you are not alone in this city, though your role is solitary. At the edge of each district you pass others like you plague attendants. Cleaners, watchers, each with their own masks, their own ledgers, their own silence. You nod to one another in passing, but no words are exchanged. Words are dangerous. They linger. They spread. and none of you dare add anything to the air that might stay too long. You are given tools, of course some meaningful, some absurd. A long rod to press bodies from a distance or part crowds when they gather too near. A pouch of dried herbs changed daily, though no one tells you who prepares them. A curved blade short and sharp for incisions, should you ever need to open a body or drain a boil. You have not yet used it, though once near the convent wall you came close. The man was convulsing, mouth-foaming veins bulging, and you had your hand on the blade. But he stopped moving before you had to decide. They also give you the salves mixtures of ash and vinegar lard and camphor rubbed on wrists and under the nose before each round. You do it out of habit, not faith. The mask already isolates you so thoroughly from the world that you barely feel your own skin anymore. Sometimes you forget what your face looks like. At the center of all this is the unspoken truth. Your presence is not about care, it is about control. Panic is more contagious than plague. Your mask is meant to frighten. Your silence is meant to suggest power. And your presence in the streets, tall and black and faceless, tells the citizens that someone is watching, that someone is in charge, that someone somewhere knows what is happening, but you do not. Not really. You follow the names listed in your ledger. You visit the homes marked with chalk. You speak to no one unless required. And always, always you write. The ink stains your gloves. Your fingers ache. Sometimes your writing slips into strange shapes, glyphs that look more like bone than letters. You shake it off. Keep moving. You are summoned at one point to a wealthy merchant's home near the river, a tall house with high walls and manicured trees that have already begun to wilt. The man greets you himself, though he stays 3 paces back. He is pale. He offers you wine, which you refuse. He insists gently that you inspect his servants before the children. He has 7 servants. 3 are dead by morning. You record each one. You write their names if given or guess based on their clothing. Boy mid-teens, swelling on throat, tongue, black eyes open. You close each entry with a single letter F for final, C for continued, or U for unknown. You begin to wonder if these are words or prayers. When the merchant's wife falls ill, he asks if she might be saved. You look at her pale, unmoving, sweating through silk, and you pause for the first time in days. You want to say something kind, but the mask does not permit it. Instead, you touch her wrist with a gloved hand. Then you write. He says nothing as you leave. As night falls, you pass the city's main fountain and see someone washing blood from their sleeves. They do not look at you. You do not stop them. You hand him a page torn from your ledger. The mayor asked you not to do that. You do it anyway. They ask you to be a doctor, and you do not ask why. You return to your quarters and sit beside the fire. The mask is still on. You cannot remember if you've eaten. You clean your blade with ash and water. You light a candle for no reason other than to watch it burn. The wax drips like ours. But what they want, what they truly want, is for you to be a wall between the dying and the rest of the city. Later that evening, you visit the quarter behind the chapel. It is the poorest in the city. No one there asks you for help. They merely open their doors, bare their throats, and let you see the toll. A woman tries to hand you her baby. You take it briefly. The child is feverish, quiet, limp. You hand the child back, not knowing if you'll ever see it again. You record its name anyway, Ellen. Small, silent. And you, with your mask and your silence, become that wall. They rattle softly as you walk, each one wrapped, bound and buried within the folds of your thick coat. Each one given a place as if they were not tools, but relics from some older, darker religion. The leather of your gloves creaks as you reach inside your satchel each morning to check that everything is where it should be. Not because you expect to need them all, but because the one day you do, they must answer without delay. They are not instruments of healing, not truly. They are instruments of contact, of decision, of silence, and sometimes of fear. The stick or cane is your constant companion. A rod of dark wood polished by use, smooth at the handle, worn at the end, where it strikes the ground, or a door, or a chest, or the floorboards of a house where something unseen crawls beneath. You use it to maintain distance, to lift blankets, to press swollen limbs gently, to stir ashes, to part crowds if they gather too close. But more than that, the stick announces you. Tap, 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 echoing through the narrow alleys of the city like a metronome of dread. Long before people see your mask, they hear the stick, and they know what it means. Then there is the lantern. It burns low, not with oil, but with a mixture of tallow and herbs. The light it casts is uneven golden but dim, throwing strange shadows on walls that already seem too narrow, too alive. You hang it on your belt by day, but at night, you carry it in your hand, raising it before you, like a priest raises the host, as if the flickering light might protect you from what lies ahead. You don't believe that, of course, but you still light it. The vials come next, tiny glass bottles stoppered with wax or cork, each one containing something pungent or poisonous or both. Vinegar, tincture, rosewater, quicksilver, dissolved in wine, powdered wormwood, crushed garlic, camphor oil, ground emerald, yes, emerald, though you don't know who first thought to use it. These are not cures, they are distractions. You dab them beneath your mask, rub them on your wrists. Offer them to the mayor's clerk when he weeps outside his brother's locked door. They sting, but they give people something to do, and that is enough. But there is one tool stranger than all the rest. Not a weapon, not a vial. It is a small iron bell no larger than your palm tied with a bit of leather cord. You were told to use it only when a house must be marked. Not every death requires such a ritual. Only those deaths that leave something behind, something that does not stay dead. You have not used it yet, but you polish it each night just in case. The dagger is the item you most often leave untouched. It is not ornate. Just a clean, curved blade no longer than your hand kept wrapped in oiled cloth and strapped to your side. It is not for defense. Few would dare attack a plague doctor, and fewer still would approach you close enough to try. No, the dagger is for necessity. It is there for lancing when the buboes swell so much that they risk bursting on their own poisoning everything nearby. It is for releasing pressure, for drawing poison, for ending seizures that cannot be ended by prayer. Once in your earliest days, you used it on a man who begged you to. His tongue had turned black and he could no longer breathe. You still remember how hot the blood was and how still the room became afterward. And finally, there is the mask itself. You have grown used to it in a way. The way it rests against your skin, the way it channels your breath into the dried herbs and away from the filth outside. The scent changes from day to day despite your efforts to keep it constant. Sometimes sweet, sometimes bitter. Once, after a visit to the tenement district, it smelled unmistakably of charred meat for 3 full days. You scrubbed it, replaced the herbs, left it hanging in the sun. Still it lingered, and then suddenly it was gone. The mask sees everything now. It has watched lovers cry in stairwells, watched fathers hammer shut the doors of their own homes, watched bodies pile in the back of wagons while children asked whether the doctor would bring medicine. You do not answer. The mask does not allow it. Its eyes are glass, but the people believe they can see themselves in them, and perhaps they can. Each tool has its purpose. Each serves not just to help or to protect, but to preserve the illusion that you are something more than human. That you are a protector, a judge, a shadow that walks between life and death. And perhaps that illusion is the greatest tool of all. But tonight, as you sit by the fire and unpack your satchel once more, you notice something strange. One of the vials is missing. You do not remember using it. You do not remember moving it. And yet the space it once occupied is empty, and your hand lingers over it a moment longer than it should. Outside, the city is silent, but your stick rests ready at your side. It is not just the moans of the sick, or the clatter of cartwheels that carry through the air, now not anymore. The streets speak differently after dark. They have always been filled with sound, yes, but this is not the sound of the living or the dying. This is something quieter, lower, more deliberate. Something that waits for your footsteps to fade before it speaks, and yet seems to grow bolder with each passing night, as if testing whether you too might eventually listen. It begins in a narrow alleyway off St. Crispin's Lane, where a woman waves you over with a hand that trembles not from fever, but from urgency. She does not invite you inside, nor does she step into the street. She simply leans close to your mask and whispers, "It started near the convent." Her breath smells of cloves and fear. They won't tell you, but we saw it. We heard them bury something. It wasn't a man. It howled. You say nothing. Your mask permits silence more easily than speech. But her eyes widen at your quiet, as if she takes it for understanding. "They'll tell you it's the plague," she adds, voice cracking. "But the dead don't scratch from beneath the ground, do they?" Again, you say nothing. But he looks up, his eyes glassy, and smirks. "You think you're here to save them? Doctor, they only called you because the bishop fled. Ask the nuns, if they'll speak." You move on. You have patience to attend to entries, to make pages to fill. But the words remain clinging to the corners of your mind like soot. And the next night, another whisper comes, this time from a gravedigger, drunk and bitter, slumped near the gate of a cemetery you've yet to enter. He asks for vinegar one. You offer water instead. He takes it, then mutters, "There's a well beneath the convent. They say it used to heal people. Not anymore. Now it just takes." But the nuns don't speak. Not to you. Not in the way others do. You see them occasionally, black-robed figures gliding across cloistered courtyards, faces half-veiled even when the wind is still. One passes you on the steps of the chapel and bows her head in silence. Her hands are gloved. Her eyes do not blink. The stories mount quietly, urgently, as if the city is trying to confess. You hear of a child who saw something crawling along the convent wall at night, long-limbed and crooked, wearing a mask just like yours, but longer. You hear of candles that light themselves, of doors that lock from the inside, of dreams that come in sequence each night, picking up where the last left off. One man tells you he dreamed of a hand reaching through a crack in the wall and dropping a bundle of dead roses into his lap. He woke coughing blood, and still no one asks you to stop it. They only ask you to listen, to bear witness, to carry the story in silence like your ledger, like your mask, like the things you cannot unsee. You begin to walk differently now, less like a doctor, more like a collector, listening for sounds that are not part of your training, watching for shapes in the corners of rooms. You keep your lantern lit longer than necessary. You touch your stick to the ground before entering any home, as though warning the earth of your arrival. One evening, after a long day among the swollen and the shivering, you pass the alley again, the same one off St. Crispin's. The woman is gone. But the wall beside her door has been marked with a crude image, a circle with a jagged line through it, drawn in what looks like rust or dried blood. You do not recognize the symbol, not at first, but later in the still hours between sleep and wakefulness, you remember something. A diagram from a forbidden text, once glimpsed in a university's restricted collection. The symbol marked a place where prayers do not rise. You try not to think about that as you lie in your narrow bed, the fire dying low, your tools unpacked and neatly arranged. but the wind outside whistles strangely like breath drawn through teeth. And in the stillness of your chamber, you hear it again, a scrape soft and low from somewhere beneath the floor. Perhaps it is rats, or perhaps it is the first sound of a truth your training never prepared you to diagnose. Either way, you do not sleep. You simply wait for morning, and the next whisper. You find her, or perhaps she finds you on a cold and silver morning, when the fog hangs low across the flagstones, and the breath behind your mask condenses against the glass like a ghost pressing from within. You are crossing the convent courtyard, summoned by a letter that bore neither name nor seal, only the words, "Come before the bells." You almost dismissed it, but something in its silence matched your own, and so you came lantern low, stick in hand, heartbeat slow. She is standing beneath a cypress tree, the tallest in the cloister, her veil drawn low across her mouth, her hands folded in front of her, covered in immaculate white gloves. Her habit is older than the others you've seen, the fabric thicker, the black so deep it seems to pull the light from around it. But it is her eyes that hold you. They are calm, too calm, as though they have already seen whatever comes next and found it unworthy of fear. She gestures for you to follow. No words, no introductions, no holy blessing. Just a quiet beckon and the whisper of cloth as she moves ahead. You pass through a series of corridors lined with flickering candles, though you note unsettled that several are unlit, yet still emit heat, as if their flames were there only moments before you arrived. The walls are decorated not with saints, but with woven symbols you do not recognize, circular patterns stitched in crimson thread, repeating, spiraling inward. She stops at a small room tucked behind the library, a place that smells of lavender and ink, and she opens the door without knocking. A question is written on it. Inside there is no bed, no cross, no altar. Only a desk, a writing stand, and rows upon rows of parchment, some blank, some filled with neat curling script. She gestures to a chair, and when you sit, she places a single sheet before you. Why do you wear the mask? You do not answer aloud. You cannot. The mask seals your voice as surely as hers is hidden behind the veil. But you tap the sheet once with your gloved finger. She offers you a quill. You hesitate. Then you write because they asked me to. She nods. Another sheet. Another question. And why did you stay? You consider many answers, coin duty, curiosity, fear, but in the end you write only because no one else would. She nods again. Her hands do not move. Her eyes do not blink. She places a third page before you. Would you like to see what lies beneath the convent? You stop. Your breath quickens, and the scent of herbs swells within your mask. You glance at her eyes, searching for cruelty, for mockery, for madness. There is none. Only that same serene stillness. You do not write a reply. Instead, you gesture softly for her to continue. She stands. You follow. At the bottom, a chamber stone lined, lit with 3 tall candles that do not flicker, though the air shifts faintly, as if disturbed by breath. Through another corridor, narrower than the last, through a wooden door half hidden behind a tapestry, woven with more of those spiraling symbols. Down a stairwell, damp and cold, the air growing older with every step. You count the turns, 7 clockwise, 2 against. In the center, a well. It is sealed not with a lid, but with a grate of black iron worked into an intricate shape. You cannot tell what metal it is. It hums faintly beneath your boots, as if it remembers sound. Around its edges, inscriptions have been carved in Latin and Greek, and another language you do not know. You bend closer. The words are not prayers. They are instructions. You do not read them. She does not let you. She lays a single finger to her veiled mouth, a sign for silence, and then gestures upward toward the ceiling. You realize with a quiet chill that this chamber lies directly beneath the chapel. And she slowly steps back into the shadows, leaving you there alone but watched. You straighten. You do not ask questions. You return to your quarters with shaking hands. That night you do not write in your ledger. Not about the well. Not about her. But you keep the sheet with the 3 questions. And you add a 4th one yourself. What is the mask really for? So you go. The crooked stair is easy to find once you know where to look. Behind a collapsed bakery in the northern quarter, beyond a gate marked only with a rusted bell, you descend a spiral of stone steps so tight and twisting they feel like the throat of something alive. The air grows warmer as you go, and wet like breath held too long in a closed room. At the bottom, a wooden door opens before you knock. You do not know his name. You never ask. The note left beneath your door said only, "For clarity, speak with the man below the crooked stair. He trades in more than tinctures." It was unsigned, written in ink that shimmered faintly in the firelight. You almost ignored it. But the city had begun to feel too thin around you, like a sheet stretched over something moving beneath, and your sleep had grown restless, visited by dreams you couldn't fully remember, except that they always ended with a knock at a door that would not open. The man who greets you is not dressed like an alchemist. No robes, no symbols, no amulets. His skin is blotched and blistered as though the chemicals he worked with had begun to mark him in return, and his eyes are red at the edges, not with sickness, but with long hours and little sleep. He gestures you inside without a word. He doesn't ask who you are. The room is cluttered but clean. Jars of thick resin herbs suspended in oil glass tubes, twisted into impossible shapes. A crucible glows in the hearth, and the walls are lined with scrolls, some too aged to touch. It smells not like a healer's den, but like a place where the laws of nature are bent and bartered. He already knows. "You're the doctor," he says, voice low and raspy. But you don't sleep. You nod once stiffly. The mask renders your emotions unreadable, and he seems to find that amusing. "Good," he mutters, turning to a shelf and plucking a vial of deep green liquid. Because sleep is where it speaks. You do not ask what he means. You no longer expect straight answers from anyone in this city. He hands you the vial. The glass is cool, the contents sluggish, swirling slowly of their own accord. "A tincture of poppy ash and mirrorwort," he says. "Take it when the dreams grow teeth. It won't stop them, but it will make them quieter." You tilt your head. A question. He shrugs. "You'll understand when you need to." He refuses coin. You offer anyway. He pushes your hand away. "No money. I deal in truths." You hesitate. Then slowly you reach into your coat and withdraw a scrap of paper. It is a page torn from your private journal, a record of the night you first wore the mask of the patient who opened their eyes. After dying of the shadow, you saw leave the room not through the door, but through the wall itself. You hand it to him. He reads it once, then tucks it away without a word. You ask nothing else. He nods once. "If you come again, bring a question, not a complaint." You leave through a different door, then you entered up a stairwell that opens beside the river. You mark its location in your mind, not on your map, not in your ledger, just in case. That night, the dreams return, but they are muffled, blurred like voices through fog. You feel something reaching for you, something beneath the floor and beyond the well, but the tincture dulls the edges. You wake before it finds your name. In the morning, you light a candle and stare at the vial again, and you wonder, not for the first time, whether the alchemist is the only person in this city who tells you the truth, or whether he's the only one who knows which truths you'll believe. It begins, as so many things do now, with a name written in your ledger. You do not remember adding it. You do not remember who gave it to you. But the ink is in your handwriting, and the address is clear. A narrow home near the Candlemaker's district, a place you've passed once or twice before, too quiet, too dim. One of those houses that seems to shrink from the street, its windows dark even at midday. You arrive just after dawn, mist curling around your boots, your stick tapping rhythmically as you approach the doorway. The door is open. That too is unusual. The name is Lisette A. and something about it pulls at you like a bell that keeps ringing long after the tower has stopped swaying. Inside the home is still. A table set for one. A fire burned low to ash. A bowl of herbs left out as offering or protection, or both. She is there on a cot near the wall, a woman of 30 or perhaps 40, dressed plainly, arms folded across her chest. You freeze. You know this face. You saw it 2 nights ago in a tenement near Black Hill. The same eyes, the same scar beneath her lip, the same silver thread wound into the braid that draped across her shoulder. She died. You wrote her name. You signed the report. You watched the cart take her body away. And yet here she lies, still and silent but breathing, chest rising and falling, skin pale but unblemished. You approach. Your gloved hand reaches out, hovers just above her mouth. Warm air brushes your palm. She is alive. You speak her name quietly without thinking. Lisette. Her eyes open. She speaks slowly with no emotion. You take a step back. She does not move. She does not blink. You've come again. The mask feels tighter on your face as though it knows something your body does not. I saw you die, you say, forgetting the silence you are meant to keep. She smiles. It is small. Not cruel, not kind. Something in between. You do not understand. Not truly. But you've long since stopped asking questions you aren't prepared to hear answered. What are you ask. I do that sometimes. She doesn't reply. Instead, she lifts her hand slowly and points toward the ledger in your satchel. You hesitate. Then slowly, you draw it out. You flip to the page where her name first appeared. The ink is smudged, blurred in places as if touched by water or sweat. But the line is there. And below it, where before there was only a death mark, you now see 3 additional words newly written in a handwriting not your own. Watch, record, return. You look back at her. She is no longer pointing. She is no longer awake. She is no longer breathing. You do not write anything new. Instead, you close the ledger and back out of the room, slowly, reverently, as if leaving a chapel where something holy or unholy has just passed. Outside, the wind has changed. It smells not of ash nor of herbs. It smells like memory. You return to your quarters without visiting your next patient. You do not eat. You do not drink. You light a single candle and place it beside your ledger. And for the first time, you wonder if the names you carry are not simply those of the dying, but of those who are meant to return. It begins with hammering in the night. Not the rhythmic clang of forge work or the tap of a coffin lid, but something duller, heavier, stone upon stone mortar, smeared quickly, almost frantically. You are awoken not by the sound itself, but by the absence that follows. A pause so deep that it wakes you like a hand on your chest. No city official explains. No notice has been posted. You follow the traces, chips of stone drag marks. A broken wheel near the baker's square, and find them near dawn, a row of workers standing beside a freshly mortared wall, where once there was an alley. No sign, no shrine, no plaque. Just a smooth surface of new stonework sealing off the narrow passage between 2 buildings. But the seal is there. By the time you dress and step outside, the street is quiet again, but not peaceful. There's a weight in the air, thick as dust, as if something ancient has exhaled and left its breath behind. Pressed into the drying mortar just left of center, the city's sigil, a crowned tower above a broken chain. The message is clear: do not enter. You approach one of the workers. He does not meet your eye. His hands are bleeding from the stone. When you ask what was sealed, he shrugs. Nothing left, he says. But he's lying. You can hear it in his voice. And when you turn your head slightly, when the wind carries just right, you catch a faint sound from behind the wall. Knocking. Slow. Measured. Alive. You do not react. You do not let the others see your breath catch. Instead, you turn and walk away back into the city that pretends not to notice. But you return at night. Of course you do. Nothing. You leave your lantern behind, this time, and move in darkness, your boots light on stone, your stick sheathed in cloth to silence the tap. The wall is still warm as if it remembers what it holds. You press your ear against the stone, but then scrape, something dragging, something shuffling. Then silence. You mark the wall discreetly in chalk. Not your usual code, not one from your training. A new symbol, a circle broken once at the bottom. You don't know what it means. Not yet. But it feels true. As you leave, you glance up and see a figure watching from the rooftop across the square. Small, still, unmoving. You cannot see their face. They do not move when you do. You blink. They're gone. The next morning, the wall is still there, but the city seal has been chipped away. You run your gloved hand over where it was. No crack, no weakness, just blank stone as if it were never marked at all. No one speaks of it. When you mention it to the mayor's clerk, he stiffens, then changes the subject. When you return to the alchemist's stairwell, the door does not open. You begin to notice changes in the people. They smile less. They sleep less. Some walk in circles, others mutter to themselves. A child in the square asks you why your shadow no longer matches your shape. You look. The child is right. You step back, and then you leave. You don't record that day in the ledger. Not officially. But in your personal journal on a page hidden behind the cover, you write, and in the space below, you draw the broken circle again. They've begun sealing streets now. Not houses. Entire streets. I think they're not trying to keep the sickness in. I think they're trying to keep something else from getting out. Just once. Just enough to remember. You sleep when you can, but not as you once did. Not the long, heavy slumber of someone who believes the world will be the same when they wake. Know your sleep now is a fractured thing, a splintered procession of images, sensations, and voices that do not belong to you, and perhaps never did. You lie down with your mask placed gently beside your pillow, your gloves folded, your ledger shut tight with a strip of leather. You close your eyes, and the city opens. At first, the dreams are vague, fog-filled streets, with no-end alleys that loop back on themselves, corridors that breathe. You walk in them endlessly, and your stick taps ahead like the needle of a clock with no numbers. Faces float in the mist, some familiar, others half-formed. They do not speak, but their mouths move. You begin waking, in odd positions, once kneeling beside your fire, once standing near your door, with one glove half pulled on. You remember nothing of getting there, but then the dreams begin to change. You dream of feathers, black, gleaming, falling slowly through a silent sky. They land on rooftops, on empty streets, on the curled fingers of the dead. You reach out to catch one, and it slices your palm. You wake to find your hand uncut, but trembling. And then there is the dream that returns again and again, though never in the same shape. You dream of fire next, not the warmth of hearthlight, or the blaze of plague pyres, but a colder flame burning in a ring around the well beneath the convent. Figures dance at its edge, hooded and barefoot, and as they move, you hear them chant your name. Not your new name, your true one. The one you buried. You stand before a door, wooden iron-bound, older than memory. Something waits behind it, something vast. You know you must not open it, but you do. You always do. And inside there is not darkness, but a mirror. And in the mirror, your mask is smiling. You wake in sweat breath rapid within the beak. The herbs do not help anymore. You add new mixtures, wormwood, valerian, crushed poppy, but the scent turns sour. Your sleep grows lighter. You begin to dread it. One night after a long walk through the fog-bound streets, you drink from the alchemist's tincture. The bitterness is sharp, the warmth immediate. You lie back on your cot and close your eyes and fall not into sleep, but into stillness. There is no dream, only the sound of wings. The next day, you find a note slipped under your door. It is unsigned as always, but the ink is familiar, slanted narrow, the same as the message that summoned you to the convent. The mask is remembering now. Be careful what you see. You burn the note, but the words linger. There is nothing. And from that night forward, you begin to hear footsteps in your dreams, slow, careful, following you wherever you walk. When you stop, they stop. When you run, they run faster. When you turn around, not yet, but you know something is getting closer. You feel it when you wake, in your heartbeat, in your breath, in the way your mask smells just faintly of feathers and ash. At first, you think it's your memory failing. Understandable, perhaps, given the long days and longer nights. The unsteady meals, the dreams that erode your sense of time like seawater against stone. But no, it is not forgetfulness. It is the pages themselves. You have never visited these homes. You would remember the names. You wake one morning to find the ledger open on your table, though you remember securing it shut the night before. The ribbon you used to mark your place has been moved forward 3 pages. The ink glistens slightly as if fresh. You lean in. There, written in your hand, are 3 entries, 3 names, 3 addresses, 3 notations of symptoms. Still, the ink is yours. The shape of the letters, the weight of the pen, the small smudge you always make beneath your signature, it is all exactly the same. You stare for a long time, then close the book. You press it tightly shut. You wrap the leather strap twice. You place it beneath your cot. That evening, after a long and silent round through the merchant quarter, you return to your quarters and find it open again. This time the page is marked with a strip of dried lavender. You never use lavender. 3 more names. The next morning you visit the first of them half to prove to yourself that it is nonsense, half out of something else, obligation or dread. The door is unlatched. The home is still. Inside, a man lies on the floor, curled like a child, breath shallow, his neck already beginning to swell. He looks at you glassy-eyed and mouths something. You kneel beside him. Your mask filters the scent, but you can taste it now, copper-rot fear. You record him. The next address is worse. The family is already gone, the home bricked up from within an iron symbol nailed to the lintel. A ward. One used only in places where the dead refuse to rest. You don't enter, but you mark the door. The third address no longer exists. You find only an empty lot, fresh-turned soil, a broken sign, and a black bird watching from a beam overhead. It does not caw. It does not fly. It just watches. You go home. The ledger is closed. The ribbon is gone. And from that night forward, the names keep coming. Not every night. Not at once. But slowly, steadily, as though the book is following a plan you were never shown. You try tearing out one of the pages. It returns the next day. Some entries appear only partially filled in names without symptoms, symptoms without names. Sometimes the ink is faded as though written long ago. Other times it is red instead of black. You begin to find entries marked with symbols you don't recognize, spirals, lines, circles with eyes in their centers. You try burning one. The flame gutters and dies before the fire catches. You consider throwing the whole thing into the river, but you don't, because part of you still believes, hopes that someone must know, that someone somewhere is reading what you write, that it matters, yours. And then one day you find a name that hasn't appeared yet, but will, written carefully, neatly at the bottom of a blank page. It is followed by a date. That night you place the ledger on the floor. You stare at it for hours, unmoving the mask, heavy in your lap, your stick laid across your knees like a judge's gavel. You do not speak. You do not write. You simply sit there listening to the city beyond your window, where children cry and bells toll and carts roll by with flies in their wake. You do not lock it, but in the morning it is closed again, and your name has been crossed out. No explanation, no correction, just a single symbol beside it, a circle, whole, and yet the scent changes again the next day. You always believed it was a barrier between you and the rot, the miasma, the coughing mouths, and the wet hands of the dying. A wall of herbs and leather and brass. A mask, nothing more. And yet now, as you sit before the mirror in your chamber, candlelight flickering across the glass, you begin to realize it has become something else. It started subtly. You noticed the scent first. The herbs inside the beak, once carefully measured and packed each morning mint lavender rose petals, crushed wormwood, have begun to shift without your hand. One day they smell of myrrh, another of iron. You unwrap the mask to check, expecting rot or infestation, but everything is dry, unchanged. Then the eye lenses begin to fog, not from breath or dew, but from something deeper, as though the glass is misted from within. You clean them. They fog again. You clean them again. But over time, the fog begins to take shape, not random, not patternless, but soft whorls and smears that, when caught in the right light, begin to resemble faces. Not that you have anyone to tell. You wear the mask for longer now. At first it was out of caution, then necessity, then something else. You find it harder to breathe without it. You step outside barefaced only once in 3 days, and your skin burns in the wind. Your ears ring. The light is too bright. You retreat indoors, replace the mask, and the pain stops. You tell yourself it's your imagination. You do not tell anyone else. One night, you sleep with it on. The dreams are different. You do not walk the usual streets. You do not see the usual door. You stand in a tall chamber made of mirrors, each reflecting a version of yourself, some masked, some not, some wearing masks you've never seen before, long, twisted, gilded black as pitch, bone white, some shaped like birds, others like beasts. And then all the reflections turn at once to look at you. You wake choking. The herbs are cloying in your throat. You rip the mask off and find that the leather is warm, not from breath, not from fire, warm like skin. You hesitate, staring at it. It stares back. And once, just once, you hear something inside it. You begin noticing other things. The strap that once pinched your temple now fits perfectly. The curve of the beak once dug into your chest when you looked down. Now it doesn't. The weight has shifted, become familiar. You could swear it adjusts itself to your posture, leaning slightly when you do, lifting gently when you turn your head. Not a voice you know, a whisper, but a voice that knows you. You drop it then. Step back. Breathe hard. The mask lies on the floor, still and silent. You stare at it, and then it moves, just a fraction. A tilt of the beak like a bird noticing something. You tell yourself you imagined it. You leave the room. 3 days from now. But that night when you return, the mask is on the table, right where you always keep it, facing you. You pick it up without thinking. You turn it in your hands. You hold it to your face. It fits better than ever. And as you pull the strap tight, you feel it softly, unmistakably. A second breath, not yours, from somewhere within. They're simply gone. But now, they are gone. Not fewer, not dying. At first, you don't notice. You've had other concerns, flesh turned black, a ledger that writes in your hand without your memory, dreams laced with feathers and voices, and a mask that feels more like skin than clothing. Rats were just part of the scenery, background noise, a fact of plague. You remember seeing them everywhere in the early weeks, skittering beneath carts, chewing at sacks of grain, sometimes even gnawing the fingers of the dead before the collectors arrived. You never liked them, but you understood them. Their presence revolting, as it was felt normal. Vanished. You realize it during one of your evening rounds through the southern quarter. The butcher's alley, once alive with squeaks and rustling sacks, is silent. You pause, step into the gloom, listen. Nothing. No scratching. No movement in the gutters. Even the gnawed bones left in the gutter are untouched. You crouch. You touch the ground. It is clean, too clean, unbroken. You try to dismiss it. The rats are gone, and something has taken their place. That very night, the scratching begins. But as you walk back through the city, the pattern repeats. No droppings, no trails, no twitching whiskers beneath barrels. The tanner's yard, the granary, the cesspits behind the bathhouse, all of them unnaturally quiet. It's faint at first. Not at your door. Not in the walls. Beneath. From below, a sound like claws on stone, but heavier. Slower. Less frantic than rats. More curious. You lie awake in your caught eyes on the ceiling, listening as it creeps beneath the floorboards, dragging, scraping, sometimes pausing just beneath your bed as though sniffing. In the morning you check beneath the boards. You pry one loose with your stick. The space beneath is dry, empty, and yet the sound returns the next night, and the next. You hear stories too, the kind no one shares in daylight. A child claims she saw a man with rat's eyes walking on the ceiling. A maid swears the pantry door moved on its own, and when she opened it, every jar was empty, the food gone without trace. In the merchant's quarter, a stable hand finds hoof prints on the roof. You begin to see signs in the walls, marks scratched into brick, not in letters but lines and spirals. You rub ash over one and the dust falls into the stone as if the wall has grown porous or hungry. The rats have fled. What remains has teeth. You do not know who wrote it. The ink is not yours. One afternoon, you return to your quarters and find your ledger open again. A single line fills the newest page. That evening, you visit the sealed alley again, the one the city bricked up in silence, the one with the city seal scraped away. The wall is unchanged, but this time you find something waiting near its base, a pile of feathers. Not bird feathers, not soft. These are stiff, sleek, black, and scattered among them you find teeth, 7 of them, human teeth. You do not pick them up. Instead, you mark the place with a new sign. Not one from your code, not one from your order. A new shape, a broken line in a circle now repeated twice. You do not know what it means yet, only that it feels true. When you return home, the mask is waiting for you on your pillow, facing the door. You put it on without thinking, and outside the scratching stops. You do not go looking for it. You are summoned. The note arrives in the usual way, slipped beneath your door during the hour before dawn, sealed with wax that crumbles at the touch. No crest, no name. No instructions. Only a time when the 7th bell sounds, and a place, the high tower of St. Aurelius. You are not sure what compels you to go. Perhaps it is the pattern of these days, the slow unfurling of secrets that no longer feel accidental. Perhaps it is curiosity. Perhaps deeper still, it is the knowledge growing like mold in the corners of your mind that something wants you to see. You arrive early. You ascend the spiral staircase with your stick in one hand and your lantern in the other. The flame burns lower than usual, as though reluctant to rise. The air is cold and dry, and the tower looms higher than you remembered, its stone darkened with age, its windows like watching eyes. The front doors of the church are open, though no one waits within. Candles flicker along the nave, unaccompanied by priests or prayers. Even the altar seems to have been stripped. Its cloth removed, its relics gone. 7 bells, one each day to mark the deaths of plague victims. You reach the top just as the 7th toll echoes out across the city, slow, resonant, a sound that vibrates your ribs and seems to momentarily still the very air. And then the room is no longer empty. There are 6 of them standing in a circle around the great bronze bell that looms in the tower's center. Robes of midnight black faces hidden by cowls, hands gloved and motionless. You cannot see their eyes. You are not certain they have any. None of them speak. None of them acknowledge you. They begin their ritual as if you are not there. The bell does not swing. One by one, they draw white chalk symbols on the floor, circles, triangles, crossed lines that do not resemble any religious icons you know. One holds a candle over his head and lets the wax drip freely down his arm. Another opens a book and reads in a voice that sounds like stone grinding against stone, though no words can be made out. It breathes. Your breath fogs the glass. Not like yours. Older, cracked. You see the great shape inhale just slightly, as though the air around it has thickened, drawn inward. You feel your mask tighten. Its beak is longer, twisted, almost serpentine, and its lenses are darker, almost black. They hold it in both hands, and then they place it gently on the bell. Your knees go weak. The moment it touches metal, the bell sings, not with a clang, but a low, resonant hum that seems to pierce straight into your chest, a sound more felt than heard. Not one speaks, but you understand. You are not a visitor here. The sixth figure steps forward and reaches beneath their robe. One figure steps aside, leaving a space open in the ring. You are expected. They simply wait. The circle of figures turns toward you, and you step forward, because some part of you remembers. The others turn back toward the center. Together you all raise your hands. The bell stops breathing. The candle gutters, because some part of you already belongs here. And silence, true, perfect silence, falls across the tower. They draw out a mask. You do not move. They do not beckon. Not even the city breathes. And then, as if dismissed, the six figures walk past you one by one without a word. They descend the stairwell, robes brushing against stone. When the last one vanishes into shadow, you are alone again. But the mask on the bell remains, and as you lean closer, you see your reflection in its darkened lenses. Except it is not your reflection, it is someone else. You stand in the empty space, your lantern flickering low, your mask facing the bell. The humming grows softer. Wearing your mask, smiling. You see it first by accident, just a shape at the edge of the alley, barely lit by the flicker of a dying lantern, half lost in the fog that seems to rise thicker each evening now. You do not stop. You are tired, your bones ache, and the ledger has gained 6 more names today. You chalk it up to shadows. Imagination. The way your mind plays tricks in the city's half-light. But the shape is there again the next evening. Closer, at the bend in the street just outside your quarters. Not standing, lying, a body. Still. Face turned toward the gutter. Arms tucked beneath it like someone sleeping in the cold. No smell. You approach slowly, cautiously. You've seen enough plague to know the look of the dead. But something about this one is too clean. The skin is not bloated. The clothes are not torn. There are no marks, no sign of suffering. You lower your stick. Just a corpse, you think. You do not call the collectors. You do not write a name. You simply turn the body over with the tip of your cane and stop. The face is familiar. Yet here he lies. You saw this man 3 days ago in Black Hill. He was dead then. You recorded him yourself. The bubo on his neck was the size of an apple. His tongue had turned to ash. You saw his body hauled onto the cart. Eyes closed, peaceful, exactly as he was, but cleaner. You step back and leave him there. In the morning he is gone. You do not speak of it. But 2 nights later, another body appears. This one a woman, elderly, wrapped in the same shawl you remember from a convent visit last week. She had died praying. You'd written a psalm in your ledger beside her name. Now here she is again, at your doorstep, smiling. Not fully no, but her lips are curled and her hands are folded. There is no smell, no rot. You reach for your dagger, but then her eyes open. Just once. No movement, just a flutter, and then they close again. This time you call the collectors. They do not see her smile. You do not sleep that night. The next day, someone knocks at your door. A priest. Not the one you know. This one wears an old robe with silver trim and his eyes are pale. He hands you a scroll. From the bell tower, he says. His voice is thin. You open the scroll. It contains only a single line. The dead do not follow unless they are called. As you turn to leave, something behind you whispers your name. That night, you dream of a room filled with the bodies of those you've marked for collection. Each sitting upright, ledger pages nailed to their foreheads, masks on every face, some yours, some not. You look up, but they are waiting. The priest is gone. He sends for you not through letter or whisper, not with a guard or a priest, but in person. Your mask feels heavier than usual. They do not speak. The interior is dry, clean, cold. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere, as if something in the air has been emptied. The room is unfurnished, save for a single candle on a brass stand, and a door at the far end sealed not with a latch, but with 3 iron bolts. He walks briskly, but not confidently, and the route is unfamiliar down an alley you've never taken past a courtyard you thought was abandoned. He avoids the main streets, weaving like a man avoiding something, or being followed. Once he stops beneath an archway and listens, head tilted like a hound, before hurrying on. You do not look back. The mayor's hands shake slightly as he unfastens them. It's not a person, he says, voice unsteady. It's not sick. But we don't know what else to do. You're the only one who's seen the deeper signs. You follow. Stone walls. A small window bricked shut. No furnishings. No belongings. You don't ask what he means. You simply step forward. The room is breathing. Inside, he mutters. Inside the room is bare. He opens the door. And yet the moment you step in, you feel it. There is no one else in the room. That evening, you find the same man from the alley, his body propped against the well behind the convent, facing the sealed grate. His eyes are stitched shut with black thread. Each wall, each seam in the floor, each stone block hums, slightly expands and contracts like lungs beneath the surface. The candle flickers inward when you exhale, as though drawn toward something. But you are not alone. The mask grows warm. The herbs inside seem to burn. Your eyes sting. You walk to the center of the room and crouch, placing your gloved palm against the floor, warm and pulsing. You stand. The mayor remains in the doorway, unmoving. You find him waiting at your door just before dusk, no veil. This time, no gloves. His hair is damp with sweat, his coat creased, as if he's been twisting it in his fists. He does not meet your eye, not even the reflection in your mask's glass. He simply nods once and says, "Come with me." The house he leads you to is strange. Stone-built but newer than the rest of the quarter. Large, unadorned. No crest above the door. No windows on the ground floor. The lock clicks softly as he opens it. You turn to him. How long? The stone does not move, but it vibrates, as if something is speaking beneath it, in a language too old or too vast to hear with ears. He hesitates. A week, maybe more. It started after we sealed the alley near the chapel. Since then, this room started to feel wrong. We posted guards. One bled from the ears after 2 nights. One stopped speaking. One he stops. You don't need details, just tell me if it's the plague. Or something else. You nod once, not metaphorically, not poetically. You stay inside for exactly 13 minutes. You say nothing. You hand him a sealed envelope. Inside, a single word. Silence. You do not wait for his reply. You return to your quarters in silence. That night, you find your mask already sitting on your pillow, facing the wall, as though it has already seen what you now carry. But the next day, a cart full of bricks arrives at the strange house. You do not speak of the room again. The door is sealed. The wall built high. No mark, no explanation. Then softly, you close the door between you, just stone, and behind it something that still breathes. When you emerge, the mayor steps back instinctively. Well, he asks, you were not sent there. No note summoned you. No official directive pointed the way. You simply followed the thread of silence that had been tugging at your mind for days now, through alleys marked with vanished chalk beneath arches that trembled in your dreams, and at last to the heavy-lidded mouth of St. Aurelia's crypt. The entrance is sealed by rusted chains. You break them with a brick. You descend slowly. Inside it is dry. That surprises you. So many crypts seep with moisture rot with the weight of the world above. But here the air is still dry as parchment and sharp with the scent of dust and faint lavender. Your lantern burns with reluctance, the flame bobbing gently with each step. You count them. 71. But the coffin is waiting for you. Not a grand thing. No carvings, no crest, just wood bound in iron and slightly ajar. You should not open it, but you do. Inside there is no body. At the bottom, the crypt opens into a narrow chamber, the walls lined with empty niches. Not all are labeled. Many are worn smooth. A few bones lie forgotten near the corners as though swept there by a disinterested wind. Only a book. The book hums. Wrapped in a cloth stitched with symbols, you have now begun to recognize the broken circle, the eye, the spiral. You do not remove the cloth. You lift the whole thing and bring it with you back into the lantern light. Not with noise, but with pressure, as though the air around it grows denser when it is near. The cloth is warm. You hesitate. Then you open it. The ink is black at first, then red, then something in between. The pages are hand-stitched and slightly warped. The script changes every few pages, some written in Latin, some in Greek, some in something you do not know at all. But the line you remember, the line that will never leave you, is this. What you treat is not illness, it is memory. You freeze, because somehow you understand. This plague, this fever, this blackening of limbs and swelling of throats, it is not new. It is not born of air or rat or rot. It is something old waking again, something we forgot, something we forced ourselves to forget. The plague is not a sickness, it is a return. And the mask is not a ward against death. It is an invitation to witness it, again and again. You keep reading, and there are names. You find diagrams of rooms you've already entered, of symbols. You've marked in chalk of doorways. You've passed 100 times without knowing what stood on the other set. There are illustrations of doctors, not unlike yourself, performing rituals disguised as diagnoses. There are records of bells that do not toll for the dead, but for the remembering. Dozens, hundreds. Many are crossed out, but yours is not. Not yet. You close the book. You return it to the cloth. You do not return it to the coffin. Instead, you carry it with you, back up the 71 stairs, back into the cold air of the surface, back to your quarters. That night, you dream not of feathers or footsteps or masked reflections. You dream of a book open, infinite breathing as you turn its pages, and somewhere beneath you, the crypt sighs. Not in relief, but in recognition. You notice them first, not through any official encounter, not as part of your assigned rounds, not through a patient's record or a chalk-marked door, but through something stranger, quieter, and infinitely more unnerving. The absence of noise in a place that should be full of it. The silence of children where there should be cries, laughter, tears, any trace of ungoverned youth, of unfiltered emotion, of small lives unaware of the larger fear that grips the city like a hand on the throat. It is in the northern quarter behind a chapel wall that no longer echoes hymns in a narrow courtyard, that smells faintly of stale bread and chalk dust, where the city's orphanage stands tall and hunched and forgotten. Its shutters drawn not against the wind or the rain, but as though it is afraid to see what passes in the street beyond. You step through the gate not expecting anything unusual. Not that unusual still has meaning these days, and the matron meets you at the door without hesitation, as though she already knows why you've come, as though your masked face is expected, and your silence already answered, and she speaks not with fear, but with tired detachment, a kind of flattened resolve that suggests she's seen enough to understand you're not here for conversation, but for confirmation. They're all well, she says, glancing back toward the staircase as though the children might be watching. None of the signs. No fever, no swelling, no coughing. They eat. They sleep. They're clean. The room is bright. That's the first thing. You nod, but do not speak, and she leads you up the stairs with the worn certainty of someone who walks the same steps every hour of every day. Her hands clasped in front of her, her feet soft on the wooden risers that creak less than they should. And as you rise, you notice a chill in the air, not of temperature, but of attention, like something unseen turning toward you collectively, curiously from behind closed doors. A wide chamber beneath the attic eaves with long tables and clean floors, windows, uncovered, letting in the gray afternoon light that pools gently across the polished boards, like a veil that does not quite conceal what lies beneath it. And they are there, seated in rows, 22 of them. You pause, Children of various ages, some no older than 4 others, perhaps 12 each, with hands folded neatly on the table before them, each with their faces turned toward the light, each sitting in absolute stillness. Your mask hisses softly with each breath, and not one of them flinches. Not one turns to look at you. Not one speaks. The matron gestures behind you to a wooden chair in the corner. They sit like this all day, she says, since the bells started sounding on their own, since the air changed. You reach the first table. A boy with pale blonde hair, eyes fixed on the window, unblinking. You say nothing, but your mind is already racing. Bells that toll without hands. Winds that carry whispers. A ledger that writes, before the death, not after. You step forward slow and careful, your boots tapping against the floor in rhythmic warning. Your gloved hands poised, your breath thick with the scent of rose and wormwood and ash. And still the children do not move. You wave a hand in front of his face. Nothing. You kneel slowly, so your mask is level with his eyes, the black glass meeting the pale blue of his gaze. Still nothing, but then just faintly you hear it. He hums, a soft note, high sustained, barely audible. You glance at the others. One by one the children begin to hum. Not in harmony, not in rhythm, but in some shared resonance, as if something far beneath the city is calling to them, in a frequency too deep for adult ears. And they, in their smallness, are the tuning forks. And then in unison they turn, all of them, toward you, and they blink. Once, you step back, the hum stops. The room is silent again, but one of them speaks. A girl no older than 8, with ink stains on her fingers, and a piece of thread tied around her wrist, looks directly at you, not at your mask, but through it. Doctor, twice, she says, her voice steady, clear. You came back. You freeze. You have never been here. Not in this life. Not in this body. Not with this name. And yet something inside you folds, recoils, aches. She stands, slowly walks to the nearest wall and lifts a small cloth from a frame. Beneath it, a drawing, crude, charcoal. But unmistakably, a figure in black robes, beaked mask staff in hand, standing in a street lined with doors that watch instead of open. You, but not just you. The drawing is old, the paper is yellowed, the ink faded, too old. Older than the plague, older than your arrival. Who drew this, you whisper, though the mask mutes the words. We did, she says, when you ask. She tilts her head. Last time, and for a long moment you do not speak, do not move, do not breathe. Because in that moment, the city seems to vanish. The walls, the mask, the ledger, the rot. And you are there again in the same room, wearing the same face, asking the same question. And the girl is still watching, still waiting, because she knows something you haven't let yourself remember. Because the children never blink, not until you arrive. Because they are not here to be cured. They are here to remind you. You leave the room in silence. The matron does not follow. And behind you, faint and rising like smoke, the humming begins again. It comes not as a sudden revelation, not as a cry in the dark, or a burst of light behind the eyes, but rather as something slower, something coiled and ancient unspooling in the dim folds of your memory, like a scroll sealed long ago and only now trembling open beneath the weight of time and silence, and too many things witnessed without understanding, a truth not discovered, but recalled, as though some part of you had always known, had always carried it, tucked somewhere between the pages of your ledger and the herbs in your mask. Quiet and patient, and waiting for the right moment to rise. You drop your pen. It begins with a voice not a stranger's, not the dead whisperings you've heard through walls, or through the dreams that now twist like vines around your hours of sleep, but your own voice, soft and breathless, speaking in your head, not in thought, but in remembrance, saying a name you haven't used in this city, haven't used in years, a name that does not appear in your current records, but which you now realize once did, inked in your own hand at the bottom of a very old ledger, with a date you cannot explain and a symbol beside it. You now understand too well the circle broken once and mended. You stare at the page. The name is yours, and then it returns. Not the name they use now, not doctor, not physician of the dying, not man with the bird's beak, but the name that belonged to another version of you, the you who once stood in another city under another sky during another time, when the plague wore a different face but left the same scars, the you who stood watch over the sick, who wore the same robes, the same mask, the same silence, the you who also kept a ledger, though you no longer recall where it lies or how it ended. And you weren't. And you aren't. Not in a flash, not as a whole, but in fragments. The stone bridge with no river. The church whose bells never stopped ringing. The boy who carved your likeness into the wall before dying in your arms. The door that would not close no matter how many nails you drove into its frame. The room that bled. The woman with eyes like needles who kissed your gloved hand and said, "You are not the first." You remember now you have done this before. Not once, not twice, but many times. Because they were. Because you always come. And when the deaths stop, when the bells fall silent, when the last entry in the ledger is written, and the last vial emptied, and the mask begins to soften in your hands, like it no longer needs to pretend you leave, or something leaves through you. Cities, always, cities. Each one different but the same beneath the skin, the same rot creeping through the alleys, the same walls bricked up in silence, the same names appearing before the deaths, the same candles that refused to burn down, the same black-feathered shadows that watched from rooftops and vanished when followed, the same faces blinking slowly behind locked shutters as if they too were waiting for you. You're not certain anymore, or maybe something. You remember walking away once, robes torn, mask dangling at your side, ledger tucked beneath your arm like a holy text. The streets empty and echoing with a silence that felt not peaceful but watchful like a held breath. And you remember stepping onto a road you did not recognize into a dawn that did not rise, and then nothing. Because here you are again, and they called for you again, and you came, without question, without hesitation, without memory, until now. I have worn the mask before. You do not sign it. You sit by the fire, the mask in your lap, the ledger open before you, your hand still trembling from the act of seeing what you had once chosen not to see. And as the candle gutters low, you reach for a piece of parchment, not to add another patient's name, not to note another case of blackened sores or breathless fever, but to write a single sentence carefully, clearly, as though the words themselves might keep the truth contained. There is no need. The fire crackles once as if acknowledging your confession, and the room grows still. And so you keep it. You think perhaps of telling someone, the mayor, the alchemist, the girl in the orphanage who called you doctor twice, but even as the thought forms, you know it is impossible, not because they would not believe you, but because they already do, because they already know, because they are part of it, bound to it, like the brick to the wall, like the name to the mask, like the echo to the bell. You keep the secret, not out of fear, not out of duty, but out of something older. Respect, perhaps, or resignation. Because this is your role. You add no more entries that night. Because this is what you were shaped for, not by training, not by circumstance, but by whatever force pulls the circle closed again and again, with you always at its center, masked and silent and watching, as the city forgets and remembers, always calling you back at the end of things. You place the parchment into the folds of your coat, and when you lie down, you do not remove the mask. You wear it to sleep. You wear it into your dreams, and this time when you reach the door that has haunted you so many nights, you do not open it, because you already know what waits on the other side, and you have sworn to keep that secret not for them, but for yourself, because sometimes the only way to survive the remembering is to forget again. It begins with the simplest act, a match struck against stone, the rasp of sulfur blooming into flame, a fragile flicker in the breathless dark of your chamber. But the gesture, though ordinary to the eyes of any other, is for you a kind of ending, a ritual not of fire alone but of identity, of shedding, of remembering, through the act of erasure. and as the matchlight dances across the spine of the old journal in your hands. The one that still bears the name you no longer say aloud. You feel the mask grow warmer against your skin, as though it too understands what is about to be done. You sit cross-legged on the floor beside the fire that barely burns your coat, folded beside you, your gloves off your hands, pale and shaking in the cold light that does not warm. And before you lies the last remnant of yourself, not the you who walks the alleys of this city, ledger in hand, whispering with the dying and tapping at doors that open only in silence, but the you that came before the you, with a different voice, a different face, a different hope, that the plague was something temporary, survivable, containable, a thing to be studied, understood, cured, solved as though it were just another sickness and not a memory so old that even time has tried to forget it. You open the journal slowly, page by page, each one lined with the script of a man you now hardly recognize. Sharp letters, too confident, too clean, as though the writer had not yet learned to listen to walls, to shadows, to the breathless pauses between footsteps, as though he still believed in endings that did not circle back upon themselves. And as you turn the pages, you see names, sketches, fragments of rituals, strange symbols scrawled beside symptoms, and then at last, near the middle, the one thing you came here to find, your name. You do not hesitate. The name is gone. You tear the page free, not angrily, not hastily, but with slow precision, the way a surgeon draws a blade across skin when the wound is necessary, and you hold it up to the flame, watching as the edge curls inward, blackens, folds upon itself, and then disappears into nothing but smoke and heat. It sits alone on the page, centered, unadorned, no title, no date, just the truth of who you once were etched in your own hand, the handwriting slightly neater than it is now. The ink faded to brown, but still legible, still real. And as you stare at it, the fire beside you breathes just slightly louder, like lungs drawing in ash. The page is gone, but the act remains. You rise slowly. You burn more entries, drawings, records of places you've already forgotten and never want to see again. And each sheet that turns to cinder feels like a weight pulled from your chest. Though you know the weight will return, because the forgetting is never permanent, only paused, and the circle always finds a way to close again, to bring you back to the beginning. Wearing a different face, a different mask, carrying the same book with a new cover. By the time the journal is reduced to a pile of blackened curls, the fire has almost died, the coals sighing faintly beneath the wood, and you sit in the cold, with soot on your fingers, staring into the last red glow, wondering not for the first time what you are without the name, whether the mask, once removed, would show a face at all, or only another mask beneath. Outside, the city is breathing again, though you can no longer tell whether it is a city of the living or the dead, whether the coughing in the alleys comes from throats or from something deeper, something older, like the earth itself has caught a sickness and begun to whisper its fever through the stones. You step into the street bare-handed, unmasked. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, no one sees you. Not really. They look through you now, past you, as though the shape of you has faded at the edges. You pass the fountain where the woman once scrubbed blood from her apron. You pass the bakery that has not opened in 12 days. You pass the alley where the rats once swarmed, now empty, clean, forgotten. And finally you pass the mirror. You do not expect to stop, but you do, and you do not know it. Because they're reflected not in glass, but in metal, a cracked pane on a shutter. Dull and warped, you see your own face. Not completely. You are not doctor. You see your eyes, yes, and your cheekbones the shape of your mouth. But something is missing, some tether between the reflection and your memory. Some sense of continuity, and you understand then in the slow and sinking way that truths reveal themselves not with lightning, but with drizzle. That this is the cost of wearing the mask too long, of becoming what the city needed rather than what you were. You are not even you. You are the mask. You are the ledger. You are the silence in the street before the door creaks open, and you have burned the only anchor that tethered you to anything else. Still you feel lighter. Still you walk forward, because something else waits, because the city is not done with you, because memory is not a thing we bury, but a thing that buries us if we do not keep moving. You return to your quarters. You wash your hands with vinegar. You pack your tools, and you lift the mask. It fits better now, not snugly, not perfectly, but naturally, like something that always knew it would be worn again. You tie the straps, you breathe in the herbs, and you write a single line in a fresh journal on a page with no date, no header, no expectation of end. I have removed my name. You close the book, you rise, and you return to the street, silent, faceless, ready. The doors of St. Aurelia's are open. They should not be. You are not invited, not summoned by parchment or whispered note, not beckoned by candle-bearing messenger or gloved hand. From the shadows, no. You are not asked to come at all, and perhaps that is the only reason you do not, out of duty or curiosity or even fear. But because the city itself, in its slow collapse and creeping memory, has begun to throb with a rhythm not your own, a pulsing you feel in the cobblestones and doorways and smoke-darkened glass panes, a steady beat beneath the skin of the place that seems to grow louder each day, as though something ancient were rising slowly from under the city's bones, stretching long limbs that haven't moved in centuries. And tonight you find yourself walking without knowing where you go, your feet moving like they remember something. Your mind does not, leading you past shuttered windows and empty fountains and alleys whose walls now echo differently than they used to, as though the air has changed shape. The nave is dark. You've passed this place a dozen times since the first tolling of the 7th bell, since the priesthood vanished or fled, or was swallowed by whatever silence now sleeps behind the altar. And always the doors were closed, locked, sealed, silent, a place forgotten or deliberately erased. But tonight they gape like a wound, just wide enough to admit you. And so you do not knock, do not call out, do not hesitate, because you have stopped believing in coincidence, and you have started listening to the footsteps that echo behind your own. Not simply unlit, but dark in a way that feels inhabited, like the shadows themselves have grown thick and aware and slightly curious. And though you carry a lantern at your side, though your stick taps steadily as you walk, the light does not reach as far as it should, and the sound of your walking seems to curve backward, swallowed before it reaches the walls. There is no congregation, no priest, no choir, and yet voices, soft, low. Not singing, but murmuring murmurs, too synchronized to be human, too patterned to be natural. A language not made of words, but of tone and cadence, as though the space itself were breathing through 100 unseen mouths. You move forward, past the rows of benches now slick with dust and mold, past the altar where once they broke bread and whispered forgiveness, now bare but for a black cloth stitched in silver thread, with the same spiral symbol you saw in the crypt. The same unblinking eye that now appears in dreams, even when you are awake. No one is seated. You do not sit. They are standing. You did not see them enter. And yet they are here now. Figures cloaked in robes too dark to be merely black, too still to be moved by wind. Their faces obscured not by hoods, but by veils that seem to shimmer without light, standing in a perfect circle around the altar. And though you cannot count them, though your mind resists settling on a number, you know there are 13. They do not look at you. They do not stop speaking. The floor before the altar is marked. One of the robed figures steps aside. Their chant shifts as you approach, grows more rhythmic, more urgent. A pulse of sound that rattles in your chest and makes your skin itch beneath the mask. And for the first time in weeks, you feel something within you resist, not from fear, but from memory, as though some part of you recognizes this scene, knows how it ends, has seen it played out in other cities with other names in ruined monasteries, and forgotten shrines and wells that open into more than earth. A sigil carved not into stone but into something else, a surface that gleams slickly beneath your lantern. Too dark, too deep, a material that looks like wet obsidian and pulses slightly when you draw close. A space opens in the circle. They make no gesture, but you understand. You step into the circle, because this is your place, because it always was. Because the moment you entered the nave, the moment you first placed the mask upon your face in this city, but even long before that you belonged to this moment, not as witness, not as interloper, but as participant, as anchor, as officiant, though you do not yet know what must be done. The chanting grows louder. The veil between breath and silence thins. The air presses inward heavy as oil, and in the midst of it all, you see her standing behind the altar, veiled and gloved eyes like Smoke, the nun from the convent courtyard. The one who asked no questions and answered only with writing. Though now she speaks, and her voice does not belong to any throat you have ever heard. You see what lies beneath it. Doctor, she says not a question, not a greeting, but a confirmation, a naming, as though your presence completes the pattern, and with her words, the altar begins to sink, not crumble or collapse, but descend slowly and smoothly, as if lowered by unseen hands into the earth below. A chamber, circular, its walls breathe, stone, alive. Its floor is covered in masks, dozens, hundreds beaked and broken, some stained with blood, others split with age, all pointing upward as if waiting to be worn again. You step forward, not commanded, not led, simply moved, because this is not a ritual to summon something new. It is a ritual to continue something ancient, and you are part of it, not the newest, not the oldest, just the next. The chant becomes one voice. The nun steps back. The circle closes. The last light of your lantern flickers and goes out. And as the altar seals above you, as the darkness presses close, you do not scream. You kneel. You place your mask on the pile, and you pick up another, one that fits your face more perfectly than the last, one that remembers more, one that knows how this ends, and how it must begin again. You knock. It happens in a room smaller than most, a sick room of no importance on a street unmarked by plague. Signs unbricked, unsealed, a place so ordinary that you nearly pass it by entirely. A place you visit not because it is listed in your ledger, for it is not, but because something tugs at you, something not quite instinct and not quite dread. A pressure in your ribs, a tension in your step, a whisper not in your ears, but in the soles of your feet as they carry you toward the crooked house with the blue shuttered windows and the door that hangs ever so slightly ajar. Not out of habit. You've stopped knocking weeks ago, but out of something closer to reverence or maybe fear. And when the door creaks open under the pressure of your hand, you see a room lit only by dust and stillness, with a single bed tucked beneath the window. A chair beside it, and a girl lying quietly beneath a blanket, far too thin for the cold that leaks through the floorboards and the silence that bleeds through the walls. She is young, perhaps 10, with hollow cheeks and wild hair, and eyes that somehow seem older than yours. And she is awake, watching you, not with curiosity or fear, not with the slow, dull gaze of the fevered, or the desperate clinging of those who know you've come to count their final breaths, but with a calmness that unsettles, a steadiness that makes your fingers falter as they reach for your stick, a familiarity that curls in the air between you like smoke from a candle that was never lit. You step closer. She does not move. You kneel beside her bed and lower your head. Your mask inches from her face, your lenses dark and silent, and still she does not flinch. You reach for her wrist. It is warm. You check her breath. It is steady. You lift her blanket, examine her limbs. No swelling, no rash, no bruises. She is not dying, and yet she knows. She knows something you have not spoken aloud in this city, or the last, or the dozen before that. You sense it in the way she watches, in the way her hands remain folded, in the way her eyes do not blink. She says your real name. She leans forward just slightly until her lips are near the edge of your mask, and then she whispers something so soft, so slow, so full of finality that the air in your lungs seems to freeze around it. A sentence with weight, with history, with a kind of gentle accusation. Not your current one, not the name in the ledger you burned, not the one you erased from all records, not even the one that was yours before the first city fell silent, but the first name, the true name, the one you've carried in your dreams and buried in every mask you've ever worn. And when she says it, she smiles, not cruelly, not knowingly, but kindly, as if she is forgiving you for forgetting. You do not speak. You cannot. The mask holds in your breath, holds in your panic, holds in the sudden ache that stirs in your chest, like a long-lost friend arriving unannounced, knocking not on your door, but on your soul. You rise slowly. You turn away. You must. And just as your hand reaches the door, just as the shadow of your figure slips back into the hallway, you hear her voice again, soft, distant, but certain. Will you remember this time? You stop. You do not turn back. You cannot, because if you see her again, you will not be able to forget her face. And forgetting is the only way this ever ends. The only way it begins again. You walk the rest of the day in silence. You make no further visits. You write no new names. And in that book on the final page you write, but that night, long after the city falls quiet, and the wind shifts direction, and the scent in your mask turns from cloves to coal, you open your private book, not the ledger, not the journal of signs and symptoms and symbols you dare not show the others, but the older one, the hidden one, the one stitched into the lining of your coat like a second heart. A child spoke my name. She remembered. Before I did. This has happened before. You pause, your hand trembles, and below it you add, and she forgave me. You stare at the ink until it dries. You close the book, but then you remember the spiral, and for the first time in what feels like centuries, you remove the mask not out of necessity or discomfort, but out of grief, the soft, sudden ache of being seen not as a figure or a mask or a role, but as a person. A person who once had a name, a voice, a history, not written in disease or ritual, but in small human things, lullabies and kitchens and open skies and laughter. And for a moment, just a moment, you wonder what your life might have been if you had never put on the mask, if you had simply stayed forgotten. The bell, the whispering stone, the city that calls again and again and again. You lift the mask, you tie the straps, and before you drift into the dreamless space that sleep no longer visits you, whisper your name once into the leather, into the dark, into the silence, not to keep it, but to let it go. Because she knows it now, and that is enough. It is a mistake, or at least that's what you tell yourself as you stand before the door. A door unlike any other you've approached in this city, or the last, or the many that came before. Not because of its condition or its decay, no. It is whole, solid, unmarked by chalk or ash or plague sign, but because of the feeling it gives you the sense that it is not you who found it, but it that has waited for you waited, through countless nights and uncounted steps, waited behind a facade of forgettable brick and crumbling mortar. Waited until your feet brought you here, without thought or command or ledgered instruction, as if your bones remembered the path even when your mind did not. You reach for the handle, and it is cold, not with the chill of iron or damp, but with a kind of ceremonial stillness, like something that has not been touched in 100 years. Something preserved, something prepared. The door opens before you push. It swings inward slow and soundless, and you step inside. You hesitate not because of fear, not even of what lies beyond the threshold, but of what doesn't. Because as you stand there listening, you realize that there is no sound beyond the door. No cough, no breath, no moan of the sick, or hush of the dying. No echo of rats, or whisper of the wind that coils through the rest of the city. Like a mournful spirit, only a silence so complete it feels as though the world on the other side has been folded up like a letter and put away in a drawer long before you ever arrived. There is no furniture, no fire, no signs of habitation, but there are mirrors, dozens of them. You walk slowly. The floor does not creak. Your lantern, though lit, does not reflect in any of the mirrors. But you do. Tall, short, round, square, polished and tarnished, framed in wood iron bone, all arranged in careful silence along the walls, some stacked, some hanging. Some leaned together like children, whispering secrets, and each one catching the faintest glimmer of the world. From another angle, throwing it back at you in fragments, until you are surrounded not by reflections, but by versions of yourself. Or something wearing your mask does. In the first mirror, your familiar silhouette, masked, gloved, tall, still. In the second, the same figure, but the mask is longer, older, its beak cracked, its eyes deeper set. In the third, a version of you with blood on your gloves and soot around your eyes. In the fourth, no mask at all, only your face, though younger or perhaps older, with eyes that know something you do not yet remember. Each mirror shows you a different you, and yet they are all the same. Because you are not just one doctor, one mask, one name. You try to leave. You turn toward the door. You are the sum of all the roles you have ever played, the echo of every footstep you have ever taken in every plague-racked street that ever whispered your arrival. And this house, this final house, is not a place of sickness or salvation, but a place of reckoning, a place where the masks meet and the story ends. Or perhaps begins again, depending on whether you step forward or turn away. It is no longer there, only mirrors, and in the largest set, deep into the far wall, like a window into another city, you see something you do not remember, and yet have always known, a street bathed in sunset, empty, but for one figure in black mask, beaked stick in hand, walking slowly toward a town whose gates have just been closed. You reach out and your glove meets glass. It is cold, but something in the reflection is warm. The figure turns, and it is you. Not from now, not from here, from before, and the you in the mirror nods. Once, as if to say you are almost ready. You turn back to the center of the room. You place your lantern on the floor. You remove your gloves one finger at a time and set them beside the light. You lift your mask. You stare into the mirror directly before you. The reflection does not blink. And now the mirrors show your face again. No blood, no soot, only weariness, only age, only the quiet gravity of a soul that has walked through too many endings and carried too many beginnings to believe that one ever truly gives way to the other. And then slowly, the other mirrors begin to dim, one by one, until only one remains. The largest, the oldest. You approach it barefaced, and this time the you inside it speaks not aloud, not in sound, but in thought, in memory, in the strange, echoing cadence of one who has watched from behind the glass for a very long time. When the masks forget who they were, the city forgets how to die. You close your eyes. You take a breath. You open the ledger one final time. There are no names on this page, only a line waiting to be written. You dip your pen, and you write, "Here ends the final house. I will carry the memory now. I will be the mirror that walks." You place the pen down. You turn. The room is gone. The mirrors are gone. Only the mask remains. And when you put it on again, it is lighter, almost weightless. And when you step outside into the dusk, the wind is warm, and the streets are no longer waiting. They are watching, because the last house is never the end. Only the turning of the key. The plague has not ended. You do not know how much time has passed since you first arrived. Whether it has been weeks or months or something longer, something stranger, something no calendar would dare keep, because time does not flow here in hours or bells or meals taken and missed. It flows in names written and names forgotten, in streets sealed and streets reopened, in the rising and lowering of fog and ash and voices you once trusted and no longer hear. And the you who arrived is not the you who walks now. Because the robes hang differently on your shoulders, the mask clings not as a tool, but as a part of your own skin and your hands. Though gloved as always, seem to know things before you do, as if the city has begun to whisper directly to them and bypass your mind entirely. You walk the streets, not with urgency, not with fear, not with hope, but with the steady, deliberate pace of one who is neither visitor nor citizen, not outsider nor resident, but something else entirely, Witness, keeper, continuation. And wherever your boots touch the stone, the air stills slightly, as if recognizing you, as if exhaling, not in relief or terror, but in acknowledgement. Not really, not ever, and still you walk. The carts still pass by, though less often now, and the names in your ledger appear more slowly, and the bells no longer ring on their own, but only when asked, which somehow feels more dangerous, more ominous, as though the city has grown quiet. Not from healing, but from remembering, from settling into the rhythm of its own decay, as if it knows this is not the first time it has fallen, and will not be the last. Because you are not new. The people see you now and do not flinch. They nod sometimes, or lower their gaze, or offer you a sprig of mint, or a vial of vinegar, or a word of gratitude. They do not fully understand, for they do not know what you've seen, not entirely, not truly. And if they did, they would not speak to you at all, for yours is not the role of a healer, or a priest, or a magistrate, or even a servant of order. It is something older, something the city itself requires to function, like sewer or fire or breath, something built into the design of the walls and the dreams of the children who have never known a world without you. You are not rare. You are not even unique. There have been others. There will be more. And yet there is always you. The dream returns sometimes of a city that has no doors, only mirrors of a street that folds in on itself, like paper of a ledger, filled not with names, but with symbols that change when you look away, of a room in the bell tower, where the masks hang like fruit from trees ripening, waiting. You wake from these dreams not in fear, but in stillness, because you understand now that memory is a kind of infection, and forgetting is a kind of medicine, and you are the scalpel. And the mask, it no longer whispers, it no longer instructs, it simply watches as you do. As the city does, as the spiral turns, and the fire breathes, and the children hum their wordless songs in courtyards where the sun does not quite reach. You are no longer writing names, not every day, but you keep the ledger with you still, not because you must, but because you always have, and the pages still turn, even when you do not touch them. So now, dear listener, you may begin to rest, for the streets are growing quiet again, and the air has thickened with the stillness that comes not before a storm, but after one has passed, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves and the slow drip of water and the distant creak of a door that no longer opens. There are fewer names now. The doctor walks on, you see though. His name has faded, and his reflection is no longer his own. And the herbs inside his mask have changed 100 times over since you first met him. And yet he walks steadily, gently, his stick tapping out the rhythm of a city that forgets and remembers in equal measure. The candles burn more slowly. The bells chime softer. You may close your eyes now. And behind shuttered windows, and beneath folded blankets, those who once feared the sound of his steps now sleep more soundly. Their dreams no longer stalked by smoke and shadow, but touched by flickers of warmth and the quiet hope that tomorrow may not bring another cart, another mark, another mask at the door. The mask has been removed. The ledger has been set aside. And outside, though the moon watches from behind a veil of clouds, it does not shine with the cold white of judgment, but with a pale golden hush, as if whispering that for tonight, at least, all is well. The city is quiet. The doctor walks. But you may stay here, safe, still, and sleeping.